Hello and welcome to everyone listening. This is Jennifer from Agi Next Conference. We're all about taking Agile to the next level in creative, unusual, and fun ways. And just about taking Agile past the 101 that most conferences are. And today, well, at least I'm in beautiful London, which I don't say that often, but the weather is just simply gorgeous. So we'll keep it quick so any London-based people can get out and enjoy the first day of spring. Hopefully not to jinx it, knock on wood. And yes, let's talk to our guest today, Susan. Tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Doyle, and I usually go into companies and look at their Agile Transformation. I'm also an Agile coach and also a trainer, and I started life in Australia, worked for quite a few banks there, and since I've been in the UK, the Netherlands and Brussels, I've been working across the financial services market. So yeah, really enjoy taking teams to be successful as well as the leadership team.
And you look at those roles as differently, trainer versus facilitator versus coach. You look at all of those as different roles or unique from each other?
I sort of feel that it's like a jigsaw. Like in any given situation, you're going to be pulling on a different type of skill. So for me personally, I felt like I was more complete after I've done all the different pieces. So I feel like it's just a lot of tools in my toolbox that I can help teams and leadership move forward.
What are usually teams asking for or looking for?
So what teams sort of in their growth trajectory, so maybe this is getting onto my two topics because Agile Transformation is my sort of passion. And what I find is that lots of organizations struggle or sometimes fail in a transformation. And one of the reasons is transformations are just really hard. You know, some people think of it as the caterpillar to the butterfly. It's not going from a place of A to B. It's fully transforming yourselves and the organization. And a lot of teams struggle in that sort of makeup. And there's lots of different reasons. But the two reasons I wanted to talk to you today about, Jennifer, was continuous improvement and the critical impact it has on transformations. And the other one was the collaboration, how you get teams to collaborate together towards successful delivery. So they're the two topics I wanted to dig into a little bit today.
And then are they usually coming in, because you're contracted workers, so you're usually brought into a company, are you usually brought in at the beginning of an Agile transformation, or especially in the financial industry that you work in, is it typically when they're hitting a wall?
I'd probably say 6 out of 10, it's usually when they hit a difficult spot, a challenge that they need some help to get over. I have been in some of them where it's been at the beginning, where it's quite nice to actually sort of look at the beginning and the structure. But usually it's where they've started transformation, they might be a year in, and they really don't know why some teams are succeeding and some teams are struggling. And they want to know on a maturity level how to move or help those teams that are struggling move forward. And so especially with continuous improvement, and it was lucky, I'll just take you through one of the live case studies I did, was look at one European bank, and they had 200 teams, and sort of a third of those teams were doing really well. So they were delivering, every couple of weeks and actually moving forward. And that bottom third was really lagging and having difficulties. And what we wanted to do is look at different things across those different groups. So we looked at patterns and anti-patterns of what was happening with those groups.
Are they usually situations where there's certain infrastructure or certain departments that are more agile naturally, or does it vary by bank and it's just certain team dynamics that's challenged?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question. I think it's really up to how individuals face change. And I think some people adapt to be more like they don't mind the change. Other people are resistant. That's what I've seen. Because when we looked at those top performing teams, some of the patterns that were coming out of those was that there was a real desire for the teams to grow. And they visually talked about continuous improvement as a group, and they really put a lot of effort into it. And especially the product owner, which was a critical role, really supported the team, doing on average 10% of their capacity on continuous improvement. And so where you saw those teams where they were continually reflecting, how could they grow together, and especially in a tribe format, reach the next sort of evolution. where the struggling teams, what some of the anti-patterns that were coming up was that you would have a tribe leader or maybe a scrum master or a scrum's master that had more of that control command type presence, and they were sort of more dictating their way of how the tribe should go. So you lose that voice of all the people in the team. And then in those situations, usually the product owner is so focused on delivering the product that they don't think about, if you don't reflect on how the team is doing and that tribe is doing, it's just going to get slower and you can even regress. And so we saw those different patterns occurring.
And it comes down to communication from the start, I'm sure, not just how those Scrum Masters are communicating the transformation to their team, but how above them they were communicated with, so they feel more secure in their leadership instead of doing the command and control, like you said, and wanting to keep the reins as much as possible. You were talking a lot about continuous improvement. So how does that work at both stages when you come in, but whether it's at the beginning of an Agile transformation, or especially our audience is typically people at least a year in, maybe hitting those walls as well?
So there's a saying of like, you should continuously improve and grow until you die. So that's the going in position. There's never, you never reach a plateau per se as a team. You can always continuously improve. It's the very lean sort of trait. And I think what you see is like some teams would improve a little bit and then they go, okay, that's enough. We're comfortable now. Let's not push the boat. And so what we did in this particular example was that we took those patterns that we're having in the high maturity group into the lesser mature group, and we worked with the transformation tribe to really help those lagging teams. And what I saw with continuous improvement, a lot of people and a lot of teams get bogged down in the impediments. It gets just way too hard. And what I saw to re-energize those teams is you should flip or reframe that impediment into a continuous improvement. And by doing that, it gets them into action and it gets their power back. And so a lot of those teams feel lost of like they're usually blamed for not delivering. All these toxic behaviors come up. And what you want to do is be able to get them back into their own power so they can go on their journey. So that flip, I really see is important.
Can you give us a real world example?
It might be just a little one, might be just they can't actually deliver particular software or particular product because they haven't got enough of the skill on the team. So it could be a simple impediment like that. And you might be point sensitive, or someone might be sick, or whatever that situation is. The continuous improvement might be to have more T-shaped people in the team, that you don't have that sort of, bus factor of if that person's away. So that could be a simple one. The thing is that if they don't have that on their radar and start working towards it, they're always going to be in that situation of always being point sensitive. So that's a simple one.
So then that would be training new and doing maybe pair programming so people learn that skill. So there's cross-functional training.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And is that something that if you're on a team from the beginning, or if you're helping out and coaching teams or facilitating or training, whichever they need, does that mean that you're able to institute continuous improvement from the beginning and it works more smoothly? Yeah,
I think definitely when people start to learn Agile, they look at the ceremonies, they look at the process. And it's interesting that the retrospective is something that people start to do, might have a lot of excitement about doing it. And then after a while, they think, we don't really need that. But if you're not doing your retrospective or you're not reflecting, then you can't bring up your continuous improvement, or, some teams sort of stagnate. So I really try and get people to think about, okay, what can we do differently, and to just have those reflection moments. And also for leadership, because I think, sometimes it's quite hard for the leadership if they've grown up into an organization of getting to a place because they can delegate and because they can lead and control, and then they have to become more of the servant leader. So they have to serve first and then lead second. And that switch is quite dramatic. So for them to take reflection moments of like, okay, how was I in this meeting? How should I move forward with this team? Also that as well. So it's getting them really to step out of themselves and go, okay, what's the best for this team or the best for this tribe? So definitely at the beginning, it gets a lot easier. And one thing I was also going to add on is that what you see is educating people in toxic behaviors. So Gottman would talk about his 4 horsemen, and, you know, 2 of those toxic behaviors I see a lot of is the blaming, teams blaming each other or people within the team. And the other one is stonewalling, which is really interesting. So what happens is people then don't reply on emails, or they don't attend a ceremony, or they attend late. And all those sort of behaviors add into that toxicity of teams working together. So it's one, you know, I sort of say to teams, they have to be aware of it, and then they have to actually say it and actually do something about it. So have your team agreements of how you handle these situations. Just don't, because if you turned a blind eye to it, it's almost like you're allowing that behavior to happen. And what was really interesting, one team I visited, they had a coach counter up on the wall, and they had number 9 because they had 9 coaches over the year they were transforming, and they were waiting for number 10 to arrive. And it's just that
optimize it. That makes you feel really good coming in.
Yeah, or whoever was coming next. But it was almost like they didn't realize, because they thought it was a little bit of a game. But it's really that a lot of these behaviors are everywhere, and at least you don't voice it, you can't do anything about it.
When you have a situation like that, when you say do anything about it, does that usually mean asking the person to leave the team, trying to work on improving it, trying to figure out why they're doing that toxic behavior? Because I guess part of it is they're bought into the team or into the process.
Mm-hmm. So what I do when I work with the team is to set up the working agreements. So design team alliance, you know, I call it. And what's really important is for that team to go, okay, how are we going to work together? Or I do this even if I'm doing a 1-day workshop. How is that team going to work together? And it might be, you know, we want to respect each other, have fun, we want to have a trusting environment, whatever that looks like. But then the critical thing is, how do you want to be with each other when things go bad? So when there's conflict, when something happens, how do you want to be with each other? And so it's the team that dictates the sort of rules that they want to abide by. And this is like a living thing. It's like a living thing on the wall, agreements, where they can change them over time. But what you're doing is the team is holding each other account to those working agreements. So then if blaming occurs, it's fine for the one person to say, you know what, I don't like that behavior. So you're not criticizing the person. It's the behavior they're showing that you go, you know, you could work in this way. And if you don't sort of spot it, you know, see it, say something about it, and hold each other account, then it will discontinue. And what was really interesting, one example, there was one team who had one very difficult team member, and the team never wanted to say anything about this particular person. But whenever she was out of the office, the team was really happy. But they just allowed it to continue. Nobody held her account in this particular situation. So it just, you know, it's almost like you make the environment to live in. And if you want to have a better environment, then as a team, you should really set those conditions up. So
I've been on multiple teams, especially distributed teams that have team agreements, but they focused on things like communication, expectations, like maybe like you would with a stand-up or the retros, but it did not, and none of them ever had the bad stuff.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's, you know, it's critical for the team to move forward, because you're allowing each other to sort of say, actually, you know, why aren't you assisting me with this thing? Or why are you always putting me down in front of others? You know, it's allowing those open channels of communication and to build that trust in the team.
And how often should it be revisited, the team agreement?
Well, it's really nice to have it in the Obeya or in the team environment. So, you know, at least in the retrospective, you could also just have it there and go, are we still abiding to our working agreements? Does anything have to change? If I'm doing a workshop, I might have something up at the beginning of the day, and then at the end of the day, if we're continuing with a training or something, go, do we need to revisit anything before the next time we see each other? So you can use it that way.
You, of course, work in large banks with Agile at large scales.
Mm-hmm.
How does it work when you have a scrum of scrums? Are these, as you talked earlier about the leaders, that might be the root of the issue often with teams, or part of it? And how does it work with these scrum of scrums or larger organizations? Are there actually daily stand-ups among the leaders? are there actually retrospectives every 2 weeks among the leadership, or just in the little baby scrums?
Yeah. So, so Scrum of Scrums could be the same sort of structure as a tribe. So if you have those teams, if they're doing their daily stand-ups, usually, yes, the tribe leadership or the Scrum of Scrums would also do theirs on a daily basis. And if they don't do it on a daily basis, what happens is you incur decision latency. So one of the key things that's happening in a lot of transformations is all your Scrum teams might be meeting daily, which is great. The thing is, they then raise impediments up. If those impediments are not caught on the same day by, say, the tribe, if that has to be escalated up, it's really interesting to map what is your decision path in your organization and how quickly can you get decisions made. Because what happens is sometimes you have the daily stand-up, it goes up to the tribe, they might have a daily stand-up as well, or weekly, then that gets escalated again. That might not be another week because the executive team only meets weekly, or it might not get on their agenda. And you might say that you're trying to put agility into your organization, but it's only happening at the bottom, and they forget if you can't decide quickly, you're slowing everything down. That whole machine slows down. So one thing I look at is the decision latency and mapping that out and making that very visual to the executive teams.
How does that work with tooling? Because obviously Scrum teams will use Kanban or a tool like Jira or Trello. Is there a way to then, are there tools to reflect the larger organization that helps let those messages reach the top?
There can be supporting tools. I think the Obeya War Room still works quite well, that you should be able to walk into, like, say if it's an IT transformation, or it might be part of the organization, where their Obeya Room is of what are the key blockers on these items not moving forward. It's really great to have that visual. I think when you start to use tools, and Jira and other tools are very competent tools, but things can sometimes get lost. And what can happen is you might have thousands of stuff there. What are the key things you have to look at? And then trying to get those reports out, to leadership. So I find the Obeya Room is great. The structuring of that Obeya Room will evolve over time. But what you want to be able to, for leadership, is walk in and go, okay, what are the 3 things that are blocked today that I need to make action on to get that moving? That's what they need. So
most teams don't have that, I assume.
Yeah. No.
And you said the other part that you work on, not just continuous improvement, but is collaboration more. Tell us more about that.
Oh, yes, with the teams. Yes, my other passion. So working with teams. So one is, and this is a lovely segue into the talk and workshop I'm going to do with Kwasi. And sorry, he couldn't be here today. But firstly, just Kwasi and I met when we did our coaching with ORSC, which was Organizational Relationship Systems Coaching. And we wanted to give back something to the community. So in our talk, we want to give people an experience, and that's why we've called it the traveling cloak into the powerfully unknown. Because when teams don't collaborate towards successful delivery, or when there's toxicity, how do you move through that? And we wanted you all to live this exercise and take the tool back to your organizations. And just to give you a little bit about the tool, what we want to do is we want you to travel into the world of the product owner, travel into the world of the Scrum Masters, into the world of the leadership, and into the world of the developers. And through that, because you only see reality from your perspective. And what happens with the teams and the blaming and the stonewalling, you stand in your reality. And through this particular tool and traveling you around into those different lands, what we want you to do is create then your land, which is like your tribe or your organization. And both Kwasi and I work at different companies, but we've done this particular tool several times, and we think it's incredibly simple and incredibly powerful.
And is it something that an exercise that only leadership should do, or anyone going on the Agile journey?
Oh, it's a great tool. So I've actually done it with product managers, project managers to Scrum Masters. So say if they're, in an organization, sometimes they move those roles across to Scrum Masters, but they're 2 completely different worlds. And the reality is quite different. So instead of like throwing people into a 1-day course and, okay, now you're a Scrum Master, it's a really interesting thing to go into that world and see what that world's like. And then, because what you're doing is I'm just going to go into edge crossing. You're getting people to cross an edge. You're getting them to take them from one perspective and one reality into another reality. And they might, what was really interesting when I did this was some of the project managers found like they were free, entrepreneurial, thought it was a great move to be a Scrum Masters. Others saw loss of ego, loss of job title, and they saw the negatives. And it was a really interesting, just a coaching experience to sort of say, look, that is your spectrum of what's going to happen. So, why is it difficult? And then creating their own land of taking what they thought was incredible from both lands and building their own journey allowed them to move, freely into that sort of new role. So it's a great tool that you can use across departments. You could do it with HR and sales, but you can do it anywhere. It's for leadership.
Oh, this is fantastic, because a lot of Agile, the next step of Agile is scaling it well past the IT department into the entire business.
Yeah.
So scaling that messaging, scaling that sense of empathy for everyone in the department is super important. I think we're all very excited for you and Kwasi's workshop.
Yes, thank you.
And here in London, hopefully the weather will hold up, or even we'll have even more beautiful spring filled with daffodils. Yeah. So thank you so much, Suzanne, and I will see you next month.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Jennifer. Bye.